my favourite saying was always, "Quite strong when you can roll." I'm quite famous for that one because I hate walking. Like, yeah, hate it. I would like ride to the shops, which are 5 minutes walk away, then walk. And I'm sure there are other cyclists who are like that as well.
Welcome to Cycling Demystified, brought to you by Foundation Bike Fit and Frequency Cycle Works, the podcast where we help you take your cycling to the next level by sharing the knowledge from experienced bike fitters, mechanics, and the hidden players within the bike industry.
This week we have another interview with a physio bike fitter, Nicole Oh, who is a very distinguished road racer, having stood on multiple podiums and ridden the Tour Down Under. I really wanted to get Nick on the show to give us her expertise on the effect cycling has on our bone health and consequently our performance, and the energy deficiency traps that we commonly and inadvertently fall into without knowing. Nick talks to us about her own sudden journey into menopause and the unexpected effect that this had on her bone health, and how she's found her way back to an elite racing level. Nick brings a wealth of knowledge from 25 years of being a physio, so if you want to know the truth about whether cyclists should be running in the off-season, and what the golden ticket to riding strong into your 40s and beyond is, then listen in to some hard truths that really need to be talked about. All right, welcome to the podcast. Nicole, thanks for joining us all the way from Australia whilst you're preparing your dinner.
That's right, nighttime here.
Yeah. It's getting into springtime now?
Yes, it definitely is. Except springtime here is warmer than London summer, so it's about 25 degrees. Yeah, which is alarming to how hot it's going to be in summer. But spring's the best here because the humidity hasn't started. Like Sydney humidity from about November is pretty awful. But yeah, best of times at the moment for cycling, except for the magpies that sweep your head. That's the only bad thing about spring here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the show. It's always good to talk to other bike fitters, and I'm really excited to talk to you because you're also a physio. So you get to see a whole different segment of riders to come into your clinic. And you've also moved to a new clinic recently as well. So you're getting to see more riders as well as physio patients. Is that right?
Well, I kind of work in a clinic that sees physio patients, and like it's kind of half bike fitting, half physio patients. It's essentially a physio clinic that does bike fitting, and actually it's actually more of a running clinic. So yeah, running and cycling clinic that offers bike fitting and running assessment. So yeah, awesome. we get a whole lot of things in there. We do get normal people too, yeah. Like everyday stuff, maybe the local population, but yeah, essentially we're a physio clinic. So I still see a lot of physio patients and yeah, a lot of bike fitting too, which is great.
Yeah, that's really cool. And we're going to get into a discussion today around bone health and how that applies to cyclists in particular, maybe some hormonal health and some of the topics of interest around that. But before we get into those deeper topics, can you tell us a little bit about how you got into all of this, how you got into the bike fitting side of things, what you're doing at the moment, or still elite racing at the moment too?
Yeah. So still cycling. So basically, I'm a physio. I kind of left school, went to uni, did physio, that kind of thing. Ended up in London as a backpacker, pretty much. So yeah, didn't really take up cycling till I was 30, and actually I started in triathlon, one of those kind of things. And yeah, at the time I was working in a private hospital in London, and my boss was like pretty liberal. She knew I was interested in triathlon and cycling and running, and so I just kind of was like, oh, do you mind if I like get some people in with their bikes and just to look at them on their bikes, and not really having done any bike fitting. I just was kind of interested more in like biomechanics and how people looked and stuff like that on their bikes. So that's kind of how it started. I just got people to, come in with their bikes and observe them, and started changing a few things on their bikes, and that just did it. Like it wasn't really bike fitting. It was just another part of physio. And then I left that place and opened a practice in a bike shop. So I was doing physio work in a bike shop, and they had a bike fitting service. So, starting to get a little bit more into it. And then when I kind of went out by myself, again, like getting a little bit more knowledge and just just kind of developing it from there, going to conferences, all that kind of stuff. And like, I've never actually done a bike fitting course of any description, I don't think. I've just kind of like adapted the skills you have from physio and your knowledge of the sport to come to what I am today. Yeah, like obviously been to some conferences and spoken to lots of bike fitters and visited bike fitters and stuff like that. But that's kind of how my bike fitting evolved. And yeah, so now I left London in 2019 and moved back to Sydney, which is my hometown. And so now I work in a clinic that specializes in running and cycling. And they bike fitted for ages. Like, I think they opened in 2008. One of the owners was a bike fitter. So they've always had a bike fitter there. And they've always had well, actually, I don't think they've always had one, but most of the time they've had a physio bike fitter. There was maybe a year when they didn't have a physio bike fitter, but generally always had a physio bike fitter. So that's kind of where I've been working for the last 4 years. And it's been great, just because like I'd say half my clients, half the time I spend bike fitting. So before I used to see like 20 people a year. I think I see about 400 people a year now for bike fits or bike fit reviews. So like obviously, the more you see, the better you get at it, the more different things you see, the more interest you have in it. So yeah, now it's kind of half and half.
Yeah.
Which is good because I've been a physio for like 25 years, and as all physios will tell you, it gets a little bit boring after a while. So it's really good to have a specialty and to have something else to do rather than see injured people all the time. So yeah, that's kind of where I am now.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I've been talking to a few different physio bike fitters. We had Dan Smith from UK Bike Fit on recently, and he was just talking about how he got started from being a physio into a bike fitter. And he asked his kind of mentor, like, well, what qualifications do you need to be a bike fitter? And he was like, well, it's not really any, you don't have to have any qualifications. He was shocked. Like, what do you mean? You could just kind of go and do it. And I guess it's the same with maybe a few different kind of health practices out there, like massage. Like you can go off and just do like a 2-day massage course and call yourself a masseur. But there's no substitute for just kind of experiencing, just looking at 400 people a year. That's a lot of cyclists to look at, and putting your kind of biomechanical brain on. It's essentially bike fitting is just spotting those kind of movement patterns and figuring people out.
It's basically a physio assessment. Like you bring them in, you question them. So that's what you do to a physio person. Like if someone's coming in for physio, and then you do some tests and look at how they move and test a few things. That's what we do for all physio things. And then like I guess the treatment is the moving the things around on the bike and observing their movement patterns. But also I guess as a physio, just having the knowledge behind why they're doing things and things like their injury history and their strength, flexibility, their condition, like all that kind of stuff. So it really is a physio assessment.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Just the reason why things are happening. I think that's the key that everyone's actually looking for. Why do you move, or why do you have that pain that you are feeling? And some of it is bike related. So, if your bike position has to be right to create the right environment so that your body can move well. But after that, then there's a limitation if there's a limitation in your body. So you have to understand why your body is moving the way it does so that you can understand what you're feeling on the bike at the same time. The more I go through my bike fitting practice, I feel like so much more of it should be focused on like body and that body awareness and kind of what your body is doing, rather than just, I think a lot of people are searching for solutions solely through the bike, which is important, but you're just missing like a really important part of the puzzle, which is the engine, which is you.
It is that whole case of, is it the bike or is it the body? And to tell the truth, a lot of people would prefer it to be the bike. Because, like I had a guy the other day, he came in, like he'd come in, this is his second, he'd been in before and he was still having issues. And he was like, he said to me, I was just hoping that you could move something on my bike to get rid of my pain. And I'm like, sorry, dude, it doesn't work that way. You've actually got an injury. You're actually going to have to treat this and do some work. to it. Nothing I do on your bike is going to get rid of your problem. You need to rehab it. Obviously, that's going to take them a bit more investment in time and stuff like that. But yeah, if everything could be fixed by just moving stuff on the bike, I'm sure people would be happy. But
bike fitting would be easy then, wouldn't it?
That's right. Everyone would love it. But yeah, I guess it's trying to determine when the problem is more body related or bike related. Like there's always a combination, but at some point, I find that you do just have to tell the person that they have to do something, and then it gets to the point of like, sometimes I'll say to me, oh, well, so what exercises should I do? It's like, oh my gosh, it's not that simple. Like, we probably need to assess you in a physio way, and get a proper history, and like, do some tests to see what structures involved and why you've got this, and it's not just here are a bunch of exercises. So like trying to get them to go through, like, once they've determined it's not the bike, it's like, well, you're probably going to have physio, and physio doesn't just involve like giving you some generic exercises, because if not, you could just get that off the internet pretty much.
I mean, that's the thing, like moving bits of the bike around are easy, so of course we all want the easy fix if possible, and doing the work and figuring out your bodies are like black boxes. There's always so much going on.
That's right.
And
everyone's different. Like the reason one person will have, I don't know, let's say knee pain because it's so common, is not the same reason someone else will have knee pain. And even if, like, I use Claire Robertson, she's an expert in patellofemoral pain. She has this theory about it's not a theory, it's, I guess, an analogy about a shopping basket. And when it comes to knee pain, there's all these things that could be in the shopping basket. It's kind of like you kind of pick out which ones are for you and then work on those. And sometimes it is a lot of like trial and error. So it can be a little bit of a lengthy process, and also needs a lot of compliance as well. So yeah, like the physiotherapy route is definitely not as easy as the moving things on a bike route, but sometimes that's it kind of thing.
And I think you're right. You have to almost steer people into the right kind of mindset of, okay, maybe it's time to kind of look at the body. It's time to put some effort and dedication into this, and that's tricky because all we want to do is go and ride our bikes.
That's right. Everyone just wants to ride their bike. They don't really want to do anything else.
But therein, I think that's where some of the interesting stuff we were talking about earlier comes into it, and how cycling itself has, I think there needs to be some awareness about what cycling does to your body. And I think you wanted today to talk a little bit more about kind of bone health and hormones and the kind of the aging process, but also this kind of applies to all cyclists really, not just those who are going through kind of midlife and getting into that kind of later stages, or mature athletes, I
guess. So I guess, like, obviously I'm a mature athlete. I don't look it, I know, but it's like pushing not 50 but close to, and a lot of my friends like here who still race, they're also what we call them masters athletes. There's a lot of masters athletes around, basically. And like, I think as you get older, the less you get away with it, pretty much. I think everyone knows that stuff they used to get away with when they were younger, like in terms of injury and even performance and recovery and like all those things, like you just don't get away with it as much when you're older. So trying to be a little bit proactive so that we can keep cycling and keep performing when we're older. That's definitely been a bit more of an interest to me in the last few years. But also, like, I guess as a physio, I've always been quite medically minded and scientifically minded, and there's just definitely more to like the cyclist than like just physio wise or bike wise. There's all sorts of things related to like nutrition and just general health and all those other things that really do make a difference to like, if we're going to get injured or if we're able to perform and things like that. So there's a few topics that I've just been super interested in, mainly because either they've involved me or my friends or people I know pretty much. And it's things that you don't see, like, I guess we don't see them because they don't make it, you would never know about them until something bad happens. So
Yeah.
so yeah, we were talking about, so the things, and they're all quite related. So the things about bone health and things like underfueling and for women my age, like menopause. So all those things related to hormones and all those processes definitely have an effect on cyclists. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
think.
I've just had, sorry, go wait.
Yeah, I think that again, a really good point from you. Just that hidden side of what's happening within your body, and unfortunately, there is only one constant, and that is time goes on, and we are getting older all the time. And if we have an awareness or more knowledge now about what happens to the body and an athletic body as we grow older, then we can make better decisions now to set us up for that kind of period ahead. And that's the really tricky bit, I think. No one wants to do the prehab, but when it comes to it, then you have to do the rehab. But if you can put into place good habits and good practices whilst you still have time, then you're going to have much more longevity, both in your sport and your health. And specifically talking, I think we were talking earlier about Phil Cavill's book, Our Friends from Cycle Fit. Have you read that one?
I haven't read it, but if it's available in an audiobook, I'd be very
Yeah. I mean, Phil's great, and he talks a little bit in the book about the aging process and how just the inescapable fact of aging and what cycling does to your bone health within that. So, as a non-weight bearing activity, then you're just not getting the same stimulation to your bones. You're not getting that same adaptation.
There's also there's the fact that it's non-weight bearing, but there's also a few other factors, like it's very high energy, high energy demand because it's an endurance sport. So then that kind of makes us a little bit prone to underfueling. A lot of underfueling is not like what people traditionally think of as eating disorders and people trying to maximize their power to weight ratio, even though that is also another factor that contributes, like the whole trying to chase a good power to weight ratio. But yeah, there's a lot of unintentional underfueling, which is also not great for our bone health as well. Yeah, there's more stuff, like cyclists generally just want to cycle, so most of them don't do any form of other activity, weight bearing activity, strengthening, anything like that. So yeah, they tend to be quite one dimensional. Cyclists tend to be quite small, not all of them, but there is a propensity to be lean, which means there's not a lot of load on our skeleton, kind of like our whole lives, just that's a typical profile of cyclists. And so if you don't have that, if you don't have a lot of muscle, you're not going to get that stimulation on your bones. So you're not likely to be osteopenic anyway, even if you didn't cycle. So and then I've been reading stuff about, because I'm actually researching for an article at the moment for Cycling Weekly, about just things like calcium. Like we can sweat out, a lot of calcium, stuff like that, electrolyte balance. Like there's just other things that just make cyclists prone to poor bone health. And I've actually been quite surprised. Like I tell a lot of my friends to get DEXA scans now, that so many, I think it's more common for a cyclist to be osteopenic than to be normal, which is pretty sad.
Just break that down for people. So just for people that don't know what a DEXA scan is and what osteopenia are.
Sorry, I'm being nerdy physio again. So yeah, a DEXA scan will basically measure your bone mineral density. So most people, if they get a DEXA scan, it will be of their lumbar spine and their hip, which are kind of the weight bearing joints of your body. So yeah, to be osteopenic means you've got low bone mass or low bone density. And then the next step, which everyone probably knows about, is osteoporosis, where you have very low bone density and your risk of fractures are much higher. So yeah, a lot of cyclists will be osteopenic and they will not know about it until something happens, like they have a fall and they break something. But then a lot of people don't even, like, you fall, you hit something hard at high speed and you think, oh, okay, like I broke my collarbone or my hip, like that's kind of acceptable. But people will have multiple multiple fractures, or they'll fall like quite, like not at high speed, and they'll break something. So that's when a lot of people will go, oh, maybe I should look into this. And yeah, a lot of cyclists seem to be osteopenic, at least,
Yeah.
not so much osteoporotic. But yeah, like there have been a lot of studies that show, especially elite cyclists and pro cyclists, like as I said, almost more of them are osteopenic than not. And yeah, there is definitely stuff you can do about it. I guess it's like the eternal physio challenge of trying to get people to do prehab rather than rehab. This is also the same thing, is trying to be a bit proactive.
I think that,
I guess that's just our natural tendency.
Yeah, the first step's always awareness, isn't it? Just making sure that people realize that as a human being, you need to be weight bearing and you have to be able to weight bear your skeleton to be healthy. And cycling is amazing because it helps us not do that. It helps us. You're literally floating, and that's why we can do hundreds of miles on a bike, relative to if you're running, you just can't do the same amount of work.
My favorite saying was always, "Go strong when you can roll." I'm quite famous for that one, because I hate walking. Like, hate it. I would like ride to the shops, which are 5 minutes walk away, then walk. And I'm sure there are other cyclists who are like that as well.
Absolutely.
But luckily, I don't mind lifting weights, which is actually probably the golden ticket to a lot of things physiotherapy wise. Yeah, like, and the older I get and the more I kind of research it, it really is the golden ticket. And so not just for health, but like for performance as well. So I guess if I can't convince people to lift weights for their health, it's like, well, you'll probably go faster, and then they may be slightly more. Yeah, like I remember I started jumping on and off a box first, like not because of my bone health, which is why I do it now, but because I wanted to sprint better. So yeah, there are benefits of all the other things that physios and, I guess, personal trainers and everyone tells you should do, that you sometimes don't get around to doing.
Yeah. So I think by now it seems pretty obvious that having strong bones and healthy bones, which means bones that aren't brittle and have good structure to them, is pretty important, even for cyclists. So, and
also because we fall off our bikes a lot. That was my main concern when I found out my bones weren't as good as I thought they were, is like, we're going to fall off. Well, maybe not everyone, but like if you race, which I do, you're going to fall off at some point. So yeah, I just think it is high risk of falling off, and if your bones aren't great, which a lot of cyclists are, like, I kind of think we should probably be doing something about that before. Yeah, like some of it's unavoidable, but yeah, I think if you're racing, you just have to accept that one day you're probably going to crash.
Yeah.
So you probably want your bones to be as good as they can be. So yeah, there is some luck, but you can kind of push the luck in your favor by doing some things about it.
Yeah, you kind of want to prepare for the worst, but hope for the best.
That's right. That's right.
But yeah, so let's dig into. So we know that bone health is really important, and it sounds like we need to be weight bearing as much as possible to be a healthy human being and to be able to do our sport to a high degree. So if we're looking for performance, then we have to be a high functioning human, not just a cyclist. So can you dig into a little bit more about weight training, and how do we get to that point where we can offset the kind of the loading of our structures in cycling?
So basically, to improve like our bone health, or even actually, I think that there's been studies that say they've been in females, like, to prevent its decline, you have to load your body more than like a usual load. So actually, things like walking and weight bearing are probably not enough. That's where weight training comes in. And in Sydney, it's marathon season, pretty much in Australia. And we have seen so many bone stress injuries in the last like 3 months, like so many, and in runners. And so running is actually not very good for bone health. It's because like the bone, like almost gets bored of the stimulus. So after, I think it's like, it's not very long, something like 2 minutes or something like that, your body stops responding to the impact force from running, and it actually is not bone stimulating at all. So people who think that running is good for their bones, it's actually not as good for your bones as you think, basically.
So cyclists would
run in the off season, they're probably just likely to give themselves a stress fracture, because like they'll have a massive aerobic base, so they can run like quite a lot, but their bones cannot take it, basically. And yeah, the running doesn't actually increase your bone density. So things like strength training definitely help, but it generally has to be heavy and not your body pump class or something like that. Body pump and all those things like F45, they're all pretty much cardio HIIT workouts. They're not really strength training. So we're talking like, yeah, heavy lifting, you know, kind of like, I'm not a strength and conditioning coach, but
more than
reps,
body
like
weight.
I guess it depends where you start from, kind of thing. So for some people, body weight is enough to start, but yeah, you're looking for progression. So yeah, I guess it depends what your baseline strength is, and if you've ever done strength and conditioning before, and things like that. And then always, like, again, like all physios are probably, if anyone's ever been to the physio, they're always talking about form, which is very important. So being able to do the movement correctly so you don't hurt yourself. So yeah, for some people that will be body weight, but then, and yeah, it's relative. Like if you're not particularly strong, then body weight may be enough to stimulate changes. But I guess the moral of the story is it has to be challenging enough, kind of thing, for your body to adapt.
Yeah, I think that's a really good word, challenge. Like your body responds to challenge and adapts to stimulus. So if you're not challenging the body, like you were saying with your runners, you know, if they're just doing the same thing over and over, the body's kind of adapted. It's kind of like, well, yeah, okay, I can do this.
They've actually found like that the thing that increases, like stimulates bone the most, is like novel multi-directional high amplitude stress. So like plyometrics, for example, you know, multi-direct team sports, stuff like that. But obviously, like if you've not done that for a while, then you don't start with jumping up and off a box. You kind of need some base strength and things like that. But yeah, there's obviously a progression through load. But for you know, trying to improve your bone health, it's high load, and yeah, as we said, like impact load as well is helpful, as long as your body is up.
Yeah, and you had an interesting story about how you actually had great bone health, or like higher bone density than average.
Yeah, so everyone's probably going, why is she going on about bone health? Like it's just a massive area of interest for me, because so like when I was in the UK back in like 2018, I don't know if any of you guys have heard of Dr. Nikki Kay. She's she's a London local. Her husband's from London Dynamo, and I kind of got involved in one of her pilot studies where they were looking at, I think it was bone health. I think the actual study was to look at male cyclists, but for the pilot study, you know, anyone could volunteer. So we all did like an FTP test, which was interesting. That was the first one I've ever done. I don't like doing those. And then she did we did a DEXA scan like maybe 3 months apart. Never had a DEXA scan before, so, and I love volunteering for stuff like that. Like I love being a lab rat. I'll volunteer for any medical scientific experiment, basically. And so at the time, like this is 2018, I had like really, really good bone health, like higher than, like quite high for a normal population, let alone for a cyclist. So Nikki was like quite surprised. She like rang me up and asked me, oh, you know, it's surprising your bone health is so good. You know, why is that? And I was like, oh, I have no idea. I do know now why that is. From my knowledge now, I know it's probably because when I was a kid in high school, all the way like through my 20s, I played heaps of team sports, like anything, basketball, you know, touch football, netball, lots of jumping sports, cricket, like all that kind of stuff. And I played it pretty much all the way through high school up to like my mid-20s, almost till I was 30. And I didn't start endurance sport until I was 30. So your peak bone mass and all that kind of stuff is laid down in your growing years, like your early 20s and your teenage years. So yeah, that's probably why I had excellent bone health. Yeah, that was great. I thought, oh yeah, I've got great bones, no problem. And so I think it was like 2022, I like came off the contraceptive pill and never got a period again. And so that's when I discovered that I had actually flicked into menopause. I was 45 and like just pretty much skipped the whole perimenopause thing. And I was like full menopausal. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm 45. That's pretty young. I'm going to go get another DEXA scan. So I got a DEXA scan and I was really shocked to see that my bone density had dropped like so much that I was now osteopenic, which, yeah, like gone from being super good to, especially in my hip, which I was, yeah, going, oh, that like almost like, how can that be? Like it's only been 4 or 5 years or something like that. But I guess it just shows you, and yeah, maybe not so much to do with cycling, the fact that I probably didn't have, I don't know when I stopped, like when my estrogen started declining, and that estrogen is super important for maintaining bone health. So yeah, I don't know how many years, that was going on, because I was on the contraceptive pill and had no idea that I was kind of going through menopause. And so yeah, my bone density was really not, like it's not terrible. Apparently it, like a lot of women my age or who have gone through menopause, that's what it is. But that wasn't good enough for me, because I was a cyclist and I was still racing and I would probably crash my bike at some point. So I wanted to get that better. So yeah, that's when I've been doing a lot of strength training and jumping on and off boxes and then yeah, like just stuff like making sure I eat enough. I've never ever watched what I eat, so like I've never been one of those people who cared how much I weighed or anything like that. So that's probably a good thing. So yeah, that's where all the interest in bone health came from. But also, like, I've had some friends who have broken stuff basically, and yeah, a lot of my friends, my racing friends, are my age. So yeah, osteopenia is kind of amongst us. So yeah, it's just trying to, like, I didn't have much awareness of it, didn't have much awareness of changes through menopause, and like I'm a health professional, so I kind of think, yeah, that, like, just trying to raise awareness around it with everyone, like anyone who will listen, I'll talk to them about it. But
it's interesting. Phil talks about it, going back to the Midlife Cyclist book. He talks about it as, or certainly we are in an unprecedented period where there's so many more people who are exercising later into life that we haven't really experienced it before. Like there's so many more people doing endurance sports into their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, just because we can. And so we haven't really been aware of the consequences or how our bodies have adapted or not adapted, or, what we need to pay attention to. And so all of this is relatively new-ish, I guess, in our understanding, especially from the sporting communities. So it just has to be said, and people need to be aware. And much that we love cycling, I mean, it's the best sport in the world for sure, but it does have consequences, and so we just have to offset some of those things. And if we still want to be doing our sport and doing it to a high level, then we still have to make sure that we're doing all the basics. And I guess it's all of us have come through our knowledge through trying to figure out our own issues and figuring that kind of stuff out.
N equals 1. That's full of experimentation. I always say that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I come from it because my wife was kind of experiencing a lot of this, and certainly from the osteopenia kind of side of things. And actually that kind of stemmed more from underfueling. So the other topic that you're talking about, which is very much related. And let's talk a little bit more about like kind of how fueling kind of affects kind of bone health and our performance. And actually it's going to spread out into lots of other topics, I think.
Like I guess fueling these days is getting a lot more publicity mainly for performance. Like they're talking about like how the speeds in the Tour de France are insane and all that kind of stuff. And when they obviously I listen to a lot of podcasts, I like them. And when they start when I'm riding my bike around for hours. But yeah, a lot of the pro athletes will talk about they think the main difference is fueling. Like people are a lot more aware and how many ridiculous number of grams of carbohydrate that people are eating these days. So I think fueling is getting more publicity in terms of performance. But yeah, it's also like none of the processes in our body can work unless we, in particular, carbohydrate, basically. So yeah, I also have a friend who's had REDS without the whole like everyone kind of thinks, oh, people who have REDS they've all got eating disorders kind of thing, but a lot of people don't. They're busy. They don't get enough. They just don't know unaware how many calories they do need and how much carbohydrate they do need and how much of everything they need. Because cycling is like such an energy intensive sport. Like we can ride for hours and hours and hours. And if you ever look at how many calories you're burning, like on a ride, it's like on a 4-hour ride, I'll burn like over 2,000 calories. Like I'm not going to eat that back kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I often worry, like, because obviously I'm a physio, I'm in clinic. Sometimes I don't have time to go to the toilet, basically, let alone eat. Like, so I can see how it can happen really easily for people who aren't professional athletes who have full-time jobs and are always busy and just like never really feeding themselves as much as they need to. And so, yeah, you do that over a not even extended period of time and you can start, your body processes start adapting not well kind of thing. And yeah, that can contribute not only to like poor bone health and osteopenia, but lots of injuries, illness, all those kind of things. So being aware of that.
Yeah. I think it's just, it actually sounds really basic at the heart of it. It's just like eat enough so that you have the fuel to do what you need to do. But I think some of it is the result of some of the culture within endurance sport. So just going back, actually, REDS, for anyone that doesn't know, it stands for relative energy deficiency in sport. I think it was a term coined actually by the IOC as recently as 2014, and they actually released a whole kind of statement. I think, what was it, Dr. Lovejoy? I think she was a hockey coach, and yeah, they basically put together a whole structure around looking at athletes, and this is kind of like high level athletes who were basically suffering from this relative energy deficiency because it was so kind of widespread. And initially it was thought of as, I think it developed from a medical background of doctors looking at female athletes in particular, I think the female triad. But they realized that it applies to both men and women of all ages across sport. And as you were saying, it's not always intentional. So those athletes or amateurs who have eating disorders and so on, then are much at higher risk. But also we can fall into this energy deficiency quite easily if we're an endurance athlete. We're just on the go all the time. We have to work and do our sport. And I think in particular recently with the growth of ultra endurance races and Ironman triathlon, where just the demands on your body are so high, there has to be some more awareness about just how much you need to put into your body just to maintain that baseline metabolism and metabolic health within your body. And I think in the past we've all been told, like, men need to eat about 2,000 calories a day, and women a little bit more. But it's so much. And if you're doing 3 or 4 hours of cycling, then you burn through that no problem. And so you've got to put that back in, otherwise your body is going to have to find it somewhere else. And that's where all the hormonal dysfunction starts to creep in, or your body, essentially you're starving your body, and so your body will shut down other functions in order to keep your body doing the here and now. And if your here and now is physical activity, then it will try and keep doing that. Anyway, that's my understanding of it, certainly as a non-clinician. So please correct me if I'm
Yeah,
if
no,
I'm
no,
wrong. But
that's pretty much it. I just like, I guess for physios we see like runners and cyclists like kind of front line almost,
mm,
and like it is trying to raise that awareness. Like it's hard to like even get people thinking that that may be a problem for them.
mm.
For instance, in Australia, this is one thing I have not adapted to in this country. People want to ride and run at 6 a.m. Like
Right.
I'm still British, like eight o'clock
Yeah.
basically. But yeah, they're very early morning culture here, which just yeah, I don't know. Anyway, which means that a lot of people will go running or cycling without having eaten
Mm,
breakfast. Yeah, like I was surprised, like on my club ride, like most of them didn't eat anything, and then they'd go out and do a 3.5 hour ride, and
mm,
I'd be like, like how can you still be like not pulling off your bike kind of thing? And yeah, same with like runners. Like I have runners who go, yeah, like I can't eat in the morning. I'll go out and do my hour run with nothing kind of thing.
mm.
So yeah, it's not like they're intentionally underfueling. They just don't. They're not aware of it. So
Yeah.
and then like like if there's someone who I suspect that like it's normally people who have multiple, like they come in, they have multiple injuries, or they keep coming back to see you every 3 or 6 months with a new tendon issue, or something like that. They're the types of people that you want to start trying to get them to start thinking about it at least, because I think a lot of people don't even think about it. Like they think, oh no, like that's not me. Whereas I think for a lot of people there is probably some contribution. So yeah, like we said, like if people like physios aren't raising awareness, who is going to raise awareness kind of
Mm.
thing? Like it's not something that GPs really are like on top of, I guess, besides first contact practitioners. It's your friends and the people you ride
Mm.
with and your running club or your cycling club or stuff like that. Or podcasts. Yeah,
Yeah.
just try to raise awareness.
Yeah, I think that's why I wanted to chat to you, and certainly this is relevant for bike fitters, not as people who are there to resolve the problem, but as first contact practitioners who are working with these people. There should be an awareness as a practitioner that this could be a thing, especially when we're working with endurance athletes who are at greater risk of things like relative energy deficiency. And so you have the ability as a practitioner there to guide someone towards a better practice. And so,
And even like suggesting where like if and then like if you get them thinking about it, then they maybe can then go look into it and
yeah,
know who
yeah,
who they can go to. Like they could ask their GP could for blood tests because they suspect this and this
mm,
and this, or
yeah,
they could see a sports physician if it was a little
mm,
bit more down the line. But yeah, just getting people to think about it. There's a lot of information out there. Like if people wanted to know, they can, everyone loves Dr. Google, but Dr. Google
yeah,
can be helpful sometimes
yeah,
for things like this.
yeah. What would you say are some of the typical signs that you're looking for then if we suspect someone's underfueling? I know it's pretty wide ranging, but
Yeah, so like, yeah, well, as a physio, as I said, it's like chronic injury or chronic illness. Also, like yeah, there are a lot of things, but people who are just saying that they're not improving. They're doing all
mm,
this training, they're almost
yeah,
like digging themselves into a hole. And yeah, when we take history, we ask people what their training's like, how many Ks they're
mm,
doing a week and how often they're riding and stuff like that. And yeah, you can sometimes tell people who are doing too much kind of thing. Yeah, and normally it's stuff they tell you rather than stuff
yeah,
you find in examination. And sometimes that is just through conversation as opposed to when we take our history as such like that.
yeah,
Yeah, just like general conversation, you'll find that they're like, oh yeah, like I'm always tired, and yeah, I'm just not, like I keep training, I'm just not getting any better, or yeah, I don't have time to eat much, or like if they're on diets that exclude things of like anything, they may not be getting enough of their nutrients. So yeah, it's stuff like that. Then
fine,
I guess as a physio, if I suspect anyone may be kind of going into that, I would ask like women about their periods and their diet and their nutrition. So it's just trying to pick up on things like that.
Yeah, I think I was wondering whether or not to say this or not, but certainly a lot of our listeners are men. So we talk about women losing their periods. You're pretty far down the line if you're starting to lose your periods, and your hormonal function is that your body's shutting that process down. But it also affects men. So
yeah.
I think we talk about like not having morning wood. If you're not if you're not standing tall when you wake up first thing in the morning, then actually that could be a sign that your body's under a lot of stress, and that is a natural process. You should be waking up and standing to attention, as they say. But if you're not, then there may be just so much stress in your system that that hormonal function is getting a little bit dysfunctional, and your body's not prioritizing all those kind of hormonal functions. So things like, what else, like forgetfulness, like lots of night sweats, things like that. So it's pretty wide ranging, and I encourage people just to go out and read up a little bit about it. I think getting a blood test is a good way.
Blood tests can pick up like thyroid function is one of the things that starts to go a little bit amiss first. Like hormone testing is not necessarily that useful as in my because also if you're on any type of contraception as well, and it also just fluctuates as well, hormones. So I think for blood testing they look at thyroid function is one of the main things.
Yeah. But you have to have someone to interpret those results. And so you kind of need to find a practitioner who's cognizant or aware of these issues. As you were saying earlier, if you go to a GP who doesn't really understand endurance sport and is not aware of these kind of issues, then you're not going to get the results. So one of the difficulties is just finding a practitioner who is knowledgeable and can look at the data that you get and interpret it for you and decide where you should go with what you're finding.
It'll probably generally be a sports physician or an endocrinologist. Endocrinologists, obviously hormone health, and sports physicians. I guess as long as they have some interest in knowledge in endurance sports, they should be well aware of those things.
And then, as you've mentioned earlier, getting a DEXA scan is a good way of assessing bone health. So again, if your hormones aren't functioning well, then that's going to affect your bone health as well. So that could be another way of assessing or seeing a sign that something needs to be looked into. I think DEXA scans you can get them relatively easily in Sydney.
Sydney, right? I'm pretty sure we can, in Australia, you can get them privately. Actually, you can get them privately in the UK because my friend just got one. So I'm not sure how the NHS works these days. But if you wanted one, you can pay for one, basically.
Yeah. So, I think I'd encourage people to go out there and just, search it out, particularly if you're kind of getting into your late 30s, 40s. It's good to have that baseline of, as you were saying, like when you were before the menopause, then you had like amazing bone health, but it can change really quickly. So just getting an idea for where you're at right now is really useful, so that if you test again like later, then you can see what's changed.
I think I read a study the other day. I think they looked at like the bone density of professional cyclists after just one season, and it had dropped. Like it can happen quickly. So, and were they new professional cyclists? I can't quite remember, but there was something about professional cyclists and bone health, and it declined quicker than you think. Like everyone thinks of bone as like kind of a slow process type thing, whereas bone is pretty dynamic. We're continually turning over our bone, and it responds to load and all that kind of stuff. So it can. I think it can change more quickly than I think we think.
So what would our top tips be then for people? Having listened to all of this, it sounds like we, as well as doing your cycling, we need to go out and lift some heavy things to challenge our bodies a little bit. Again, like seek out, It's all the basic things. Lift heavy things, eat enough.
All these things are actually going to be in a Cycling Weekly article
Hey.
soon, hopefully. So I'm just in the process of writing it. So maybe around October it should be out with, things that cyclists can do for their bone health.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you guys aren't aware, then Nicole writes a fairly regular column within Cycling
Fairly
Weekly.
regularly.
So you've been doing that for years now, haven't you?
Yeah, probably since I remember my first one was actually I got a ride in like TDU, Tour Down Under, the year where Australia wouldn't let anyone in, basically. So TDU was like just all the local pros who were home for the summer and like just the national league teams, and I got an individual entry. So I did that, and the editor of Cycling Weekly saw my Instagram post and said, "Oh, do you mind writing an article for us? That sounds like pretty cool." So I did. And then after that, it was like, "Oh, do you want to write some physio ones for us and some bike fitting ones?" I was like, "Yeah, sure." So that's kind of how it started at the beginning of 2022. And so they've just given me topics on mainly bike fitting or physio, or I'll give them topics and then just write, which I've really, really enjoyed. If anything, it makes me do CPD, which like we're meant to do it all the time, but we only really write it down when someone audits us. But it's meant I've done heaps of research into all these topics, which I find like super interesting, and I would not have done all the research if I wasn't writing these articles. So it's been great. Like just like kind of delving into my inner nerdism, which has always really existed. Like I was a nerd at school, so I'm just really enjoying like looking into all the science and all the research, and then producing some type of article which hopefully is helpful to people. So
so that's good. So we've got eat lots, lift heavy things, read Nicole's articles, and
jump up and down off boxes, make sure you get enough vitamin D. So in Australia, like we have plenty of sunshine, but in the UK, probably not. So probably looking at supplementation if it's low, but at which point you'll probably you need to get it tested to know if yours is low, sufficient calcium. So there's quite a few tips there.
And we didn't even talk about sleep as well. So
I used to love that. Yeah, I used to go on about sleep. Sleep is, I think, the like most important function of life, pretty much, because everything happens when we sleep. Like all the things we do with training. If you're not getting enough sleep, your body's not going to make those adaptations. So it's almost like there's no point in training if you're not going to sleep. I remember reading a book, I think it's by Matthew Walker, called Why We Sleep. It's like the best book. I love it. How important sleep is. Yeah,
I'll try and drop a link into the show notes for that.
It's fantastic. So I again, like it's hard to tell people. Like for instance, this week is tapering week for a lot of people for Sydney Marathon, and they're like, "What should I do?" I'm just like, just eat as much as you can and sleep as much as you can. That's it. Like nothing you're going to do this week is going to help. Just eat and sleep kind of thing. It is two of the most important processes.
It's always super tricky, isn't it? I've got a couple of athletes who are tapering for Ironman. They're like, "Oh, I just didn't quite finish that kind of last training block." It's like, dude, like you don't need to do it. Like the best you can do is be like super rested and be ready to go on the day. Like any adaptation is not going to happen like now. You were talking earlier about kind of new pros coming into the sport, and I think we do forget, especially for those of us who've been in the sport for a long time and doing sport for a long time, there's always new people coming into it, and so all of this information still needs to be said repeatedly.
The people who've been doing it for years that kind of will just keep doing what they've been doing. So I think almost people who are a bit newer to the sport are a little bit more open because they're not subject to that, like when you go out on like one beat on and one muesli bar and that's it kind of thing. So I find it's probably people who've been cycling for years who are less likely to change their habits than people who are kind of newer to it and looking into kind of the latest kind of training and nutrition and all that kind of stuff.
Everyone's so different. I think probably that if you're going to go and look into all of this, you need to look at yourself as an individual and seek out a practitioner who is able to dig into that with you. Otherwise, you can get into so much generic information, you'll just get lost in that kind of web, and it may not be appropriate for you. Even just differences between men and women. I was just thinking about you talking about going out on fasted rides in the morning, and certainly I did that when I was doing a bit more training and so on. And interestingly, I think my body seemed to deal okay with it. But my wife, on the other hand, she just like it destroyed her. Like if any she did any fasted training, she's just like, oh my God, I was just asleep on the couch like afterwards. And it's just that you just need the fuel for your body to kind of do that thing, or different fuel systems. So she's definitely more carbohydrate kind of burning at that point. You just need to work out stuff for you and figure out what works for you. Okay, I think that's probably a good place to kind of wrap it up. We've been going for about an hour or so. I think that's a good place because we've covered quite a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff in there. It's a really deep topic, but a really important one. So I encourage people to go out there and do the research and take an objective look at yourself. Think about the training that you're doing and, you know, the life stresses that are impacting it and what the healthy choices are. Sounds very boring. Sounds like my mum. But it's all the important stuff, all the basic things, which are, I guess, the boring things, like sleeping, eating,
sleep.
lifting heavy things.
I know, like, people like want to know the latest training methods and what interval I should be doing, or even, it's like just eat and sleep. They're halfway there, basically.
Well, it's like when people talk about marginal gains, like no one talks about maximal gains. You have to earn your marginal gains. Like you have to make sure that all the basics, all the foundational blocks are there before you can start looking at the marginal
pyramid.
gains. Yeah,
the good old pyramid.
So we'll see.
Anyway. Oh, well, I guess there hasn't been a lot of physio chat.
Yeah.
Which is fun. I'm sick of physio. No, just kidding. I'm not sick of physio.
It's good. There's, I think, just your knowledge and experience as a physio and a bike fitter is very much appreciated. So, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast.
No problem.
And where can people find you if they are seeking you out?
As in, where do I work? If you're in Sydney?
Well, physically on the web. So if you are in Sydney, then I work at Milson's Point in a clinic called the Body Mechanic. That's where I spend most of my time. I do a little bit of freelance work down south. But these days, probably Instagram. I'm on Instagram like everyone. What is my Instagram handle? I don't even know. Nick _O, maybe 77. So I do actually put up obviously there's a lot of cycling, racing stuff, but it's just half cycling, half science, basically. And occasional wombats on my Instagram page, but if there's any useful information besides pictures of wombats, it's usually on Instagram. I will have wombats. A website. More wombats.
I did have a website and it expired, and I'm in the process of getting a new website together. So that hopefully will be, my friend's building it for me. She keeps asking me for the content. So I'm planning to have a website. It will be Peloton Physiotherapy, something like that. So
cool.
But awesome. If not, social media. If anyone wants to contact me.
And Cycling Weekly.
Oh yeah, and Cycling Weekly articles, basically. Yeah, they're getting less often because I think I've talked about every aspect of bike fit and knee pain and neck pain and all sorts of cycling related pain. So we're kind of running out of topics. But there are any other good topics out there that I can convince Cycling Weekly they need. Then let me know.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we can find a few more topics to talk about. So, well, thank you very much, Nick. And
thanks for having me, Wei. I do like to talk a bit, so love a good podcast.
Yeah. So I'll let you go now, and you can enjoy your dinner.
Yeah. All right.
Cheers.
Catch you soon.
Bye. If you made it to the end of this episode, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard, do leave us a rating or review, as this really helps other riders find our podcast too, and motivates us to keep making more episodes. Thanks for your support, and catch you on the next one.
Suffering from numb hands, tingling toes, and any other persistent discomforts when you ride? These are all signs that your bike fit could be improved. If you're bike fit curious, get in touch with Wei or Matt by emailing info@foundation.fit or finding them on Instagram @FDN_bikefit. Finally, for all your bike servicing needs, custom dream bike or hand-built wheels, go to www.frequencycycleworks.com or find me on Instagram @frequencycycleworks. Until next time, keep on spinning.